Thousands of fast food workers in several cities, including New York and Chicago, have walked off their jobs today protesting low wages.
We out here fighting for change. Fighting for change.
Workers from many of the nation's most popular fast food restaurants, including McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, and KFC, all calling for a living wage of $15 an hour. Now, all of this is part of a growing movement that started last fall in New York, and it's now expanded to 7 cities.
I'm still completely broke. Even with living with my mother, imagine all of my fellow workers who are trying to support families on the same wage as I get. It's completely impossible.
In a multi-billion-dollar industry where they are making record profits, literally billions and billions in profits and recovering from the recession, and the workers on the bottom are making poverty wages.
Well, the protests come as an exclusive Associated Press survey finds 4 out of 5 adults struggle with joblessness and near poverty or have relied on welfare at some part of their life. And according to the New York Times, 28 million Americans, that is 1 in 5, by the way, earn less than $10 an hour. President Obama discussed the income inequality in an interview with the New York Times.
There was a sense of not upward mobility in the abstract. It was part and parcel of who we were as Americans. And that's what's been eroding over the last 20, 30 years, well before the financial crisis.
And joining me now live, Washington Post business reporter Michael Fletcher. Michael, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Let's first discuss this movement. I mean, here you've got about a dozen cities, major cities, as I pointed out, and you've got these workers who say that they want a wage of $15 an hour. This is what they're calling for. We heard it from one worker. She said, I don't have kids, but many of these people have children. They're working double jobs, and ends are not meeting. They're not even coming close.
Not close. And how can you, making, $8, $9 an hour in some cases? As you pointed out, 1 in 5 workers in this country make under $10 an hour, slightly under $20,000 a year. So this movement, I think, they're trying to sort of demonstrate the importance of the work they do and sort of to make the point there's nothing that's intrinsic about restaurant work or fast food restaurant work that says it has to be low paying. These are huge industries, and they want to point this out to people.
In the New York Times op-ed, Stephen Greenhouse wrote in his it's titled "Fighting Back Against Wretched Wages." It says many low-paid workers feel their employers have put an invisible ceiling on their wages, with little prospect of ever making more than $10 or $11 an hour. As corporations have focused on keeping wages competitive and maximizing profits to benefit shareholders. The richest Americans have benefited mightily from corporate America's record profits and the stock market repeated highs. And when you look at even just some of the advancement, and we're talking about in 2012, the estimate was 2.9 million people. That's what the labor statistics says are working in food prep and serving as service workers, including fast food. But when you look at even, the ability to move up the ladder doesn't exist with many of these workers. So there's not even, Michael, a growth potential for so many of these people.
I think that's exactly right. And they essentially have no leverage. And that's what they're trying to create now by organizing, by walking out together. At least then there'll be some leverage and maybe some means to demand more from their employers. Not only do they suffer with low wages, they often have erratic hours. They get 30 hours one week, 20 hours the next, maybe 35 the next week, that sort of thing. And it's not just fast food workers. I mean, it's retail clerks in many cases. It's people who work in nursing homes and that kind of thing. And the irony is, if you look at the fastest growing professions in this country, many of those are these low-wage professions. And these people want to sort of build a leverage where they can make demands of their employers to get a bigger piece of the pie.
Let me play a little of what the president said last Wednesday when he discussed the minimum wage and the war, quite honestly, to increase it. Let's play it.
I am going to keep making the case that we need to raise the minimum wage because it's lower right now than it was when Ronald Reagan took office. It's time for the minimum wage to go up.
The minimum wage, $7.25 an hour. Many of these workers, Michael, who were out picketing, they're not a part of a union, and that's a part of their demand right now. They want to form a union without fear of retaliation. Now, the Service Employees International Union provided money for these campaigns and helping to organize the strikes, but these folks are not unionized. They don't have the protection that once existed for workers, especially those who were people who were basically the working poor, that the unions provided.
Oh, that's absolutely right. And we've seen a dwindling share of private sector workers in this country who are members of unions. And, and people have their critiques of unions, of course, but the fact is that wages went up much more when, go up more when people are unionized. When they're organized, they get better benefits and that sort of thing. And fast food work, unlike, other sectors, the manufacturing sector is highly unionized and pays more. And there's been kind of a backlash, people saying, well, we have to hold wages down to be competitive internationally. Fast food work cannot be outsourced. It's something that will remain in the United States, obviously, because it's performed here and the services are all in front of you. So they think that there's ripe potential here for unionization and for sort of building the kind of leverage that will increase wages over time.
Well, obviously, these protests we saw, there were thousands of people. They're not the size, at least as of yet, as the Occupy movement. Might we see more of that as, these, again, working poor demand that their voice be heard? And it is not a college student or a high school kid who's trying to pick up an extra few bucks, to buy a few things they want. These are people trying to feed their families.
Exactly. I mean, and you have that group. You'll have some high school kids, obviously, who work in fast food restaurants. Some, people early in college. But there, as you point out, there are many, many people who this is their bread and butter. This is a job they go to every day to, support themselves and their families. And I think you're going to see this movement grow, probably slowly over time. But I believe the momentum is clearly set. But it also remains to be seen how much they'll be able to gain from the strikes we've had so far. And there have been isolated cases of some small wage increases, some improvements in scheduling, but nothing that you would call a major breakthrough. So we'll have to see.
All right. Michael Fletcher with the Washington Post. Thank you, Michael, for your time.